May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and Redeemer.
Amen.
Amen. This gospel lesson starts with the words, Jesus put before the crowd another parable. I'd like to put this into somewhat of a perspective. He is traveling, and he's gone to Nazareth. Because if you read the first chapter, the chapter right before this, he was meeting with his mother and his brothers. And he left the house and went out by the sea. And there were crowds. So many so that he got into a boat, went out a little ways, and the people were sitting on the beach. And he began to teach them in parables. As it says, set forth another parable. The first one you heard last week, the seed and the sower in the soil. This week, we've got the wheat and the tares. I thought it would be a rather easy one for me to preach on because I am a weeder. That's how I spend my Saturdays when I'm not preparing a sermon. I'm out in my yard weeding. And I've had a couple people tell me, well, you ought to be an expert at this. Well, I don't think so. The weeds, the tares, they were called darnel. And it is a plant that once it sprouts its seed, you cannot tell the difference between the stalk of wheat and the stalk of darnel. There is no way to tell the difference. Darnel's roots will go down and they will intermesh, entangle with the roots of the wheat. So if you could tell, pulling them up, you would pull up the wheat. So the master of the house says, don't pull them up. You have to be careful with darnel. You can tell the difference between darnel and wheat once it blooms and blossoms. You can tell by the fruit they produce. The wheat is good and you can eat it. The darnel is semi-poisonous. And if you eat the darnel, you will get sick, maybe even sick enough to die. So it's important that they be separated. And it tells us at the end of the age, they will be separated. The age is when it becomes ripe. That is when they can do it. Being a weeder, it made me think about what is really a weed. I pull things that other people save. Pulling weeds is a very subjective thing. I decide what is a weed in my yard. If it's something I think is obnoxious, I can get rid of it. If it's something that doesn't belong in a certain place, if I have a rose bed and there's something else in there growing, it doesn't belong there, and I can get rid of it. It is subjective. And as I got further into this lesson, this is a very subjective lesson. You have the good seeds. And the parable tells us they're the children of the kingdom. We have the tares. They are the children of the evil one. And the harvest is the end of the age. That is given to us. And if any of you remember Father Alex's series on parables, Jesus uses parables. The subject of a parable is something that people are familiar with. Farming, planting, sowing, whatnot. They can relate to it, but they tell a different story. I kept coming across a statement. Well, let's take a look first at our own world. The world we live in, the field, is full of good and bad seeds. We have good and we have evil around us today. How can we separate it? Who is going to decide who is good and who is evil? We know it's there. But can we read the hearts of those people? Can we act instead of God, saying this is good, this is bad, this person is good, this one's bad? Bing, 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 bing. That is not our job. We are not here to do that. In the Bible, very early, the 2nd chapter of Genesis, that's not very far into it, tells us that. God told the couple, you shall not eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge and evil. You shall not. That's my tree. Don't eat it. The serpent told him, well, that's good. It's nice to know the difference between good and evil. You can eat that tree. It'll make you smart. And we know what happened. Determining good and evil is not our job. Why was this lesson even in here? Why is it placed where it is? Well, I'm sure the Bible tells us the crowds were massive, lots of people. When Matthew wrote it, the sect of Judaism that now became Christianity, and then the early Christian church, had a lot of people. They gained a lot of converts. And if you get a lot of people, we are a competitive people. How often do we look at what's best? Who can run the fastest? Who can throw the hardest? Who can jump the highest? Everything we rate. In our lives, we compete with each other and watch other people. We pay to watch other people compete. I once had a coach that said, you know, if you're out here playing for fun, why is somebody keeping score? We're looking at scores. We're rooting for good or for evil. We are competitive. One of the, I read a lot of commentaries on this because good and evil just fascinates me. And one of them commented, and it really struck home. Jesus knows that our tendency is to judge others. We try to identify those who are good Christians and those who are not quite doing so well. And the community of faith includes those professing faith and yet who do evil. But the prerogative of judging the quality of someone's relationship to God belongs to God only. Only God. The Bible tells us, and Jesus has told us, that we will be judged by the fruit that we bear. It's the way they were judging between the wheat and the tares. By the fruit they bore. You have to wait till it's end time for that. Once they bear fruit, you can tell. When our time comes, that's when we're going to be judged. And we're going to be judged by the fruit that we bear. He's not going to separate us now. There's not going to be all of a sudden a big rumble of the clouds and there's a sign saying, Richard, you go this way. Joe, you go this way. Shirley, you go that way, whatnot. No. Our day will come, and that's when it's going to come. What do we do in the meantime? We need to be patient. There isn't a one of us here that is perfect. Not a one of us. There is a mixture within us of both good and bad. What's going to prevail? What's the ratio in you? What's the ratio in me? How often does our bad side show up? How often does our good side show up? And it may change from time to time. People are capable of changing. So on the day of the harvest, when they look at the fruit that we've borne, is it going to be wheat or is it going to be tares? That's something to think about because we don't know when that time's coming. Wheat or tares?